Hello everybody.
Hello everyone. Today we're talking again about the subject of conversation. I think as we go along with these conversations of ours, it will become clear that we constantly come back to certain themes. From this angle and then from that angle, because they are cornerstones in our lives, and conversation is one of them. It is so important. That's why we chose our recordings to be conversations. It's not only one directional, but it's reciprocal. We have feedback, so conversation is very important. And if we talk about conversation, we also imply, or the idea is, that it can be a conversation in a very wide sense as well. We can have a conversation, but it can be much more expansive than that. Who do you see as being, or what do you see as being part of the conversation?
I think if I think about conversation coming from a human source, then if we don't just talk about physically being in conversation with other people, definitely books would be an important way of having that interaction. Often in the studio, I will put on an audio book or listen to podcasts, and it's a lovely way to work. As I've said before, to keep my brain busy and my hands can carry on with the creative part of my day. And I love those books that I can have a discussion with, say, with my daughter, if she's also listening to the same book. That again brings another form of conversation, another depth into relationships. When you and I both read a book or listen to a book, it's lovely to have a conversation about that book as well, and be in conversation with the book itself. So definitely books, and then also movies. I think movies on a very almost subconscious level, and then also things that I find really inspiring. George always laughs at me when we are going to watch a movie. He'll say, "So what shall we watch?" And I don't go to thrillers or suspense stories, because that I get so worked up that I really can't sleep at night. But then also, if it's something really creative, like Chef's Table or a series called Abstract, where it's all about people developing things and designing anything from sport shoes to all these wonderful chef's tables and food, I get so inspired that I can also not sleep. So it's a very delicate sort of a path that we have to tread for movies for me to watch that will actually allow me to
She's
sleep
a very
at night.
sensitive viewer.
But movies really speak to me on a very deep level. I think visually, but then also the layers in story, I think is wonderful. The interaction that happens between characters. Sometimes you recognize something of somebody that you know, or something in yourself, or something becomes clearer. But it's never like a really obvious lesson. As a child, I really hated Pinocchio, the story of Pinocchio, because it was just too obvious. If you lie, your nose will grow. You know, that was just too obvious. Everybody knows not to lie. So for me, that wasn't that wasn't a way to teach me anything. And I look at our granddaughter when we're telling her stories. You don't actually know what is being laid down in layers in her. It is so subconscious and so delicate and wonderful. So I think that, but then also, of course, a much wider interaction in terms of conversation with nature, conversation with your pets, all of that, the interaction between me and an orchid that I'm trying to not kill and keep alive, and watching it grow. All of that, I think, forms part of a very wide conversational universe.
And experiencing through that, being in conversation with God.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Returning to the whole issue of messages coming through on a very delicate, almost subconscious level, either through watching movies or reading a book or listening to a podcast or an audiobook. By implication, you are saying it needn't be specifically Christian.
Definitely not. I think there is wisdom to be found in any form, and I don't even just mean books or movies or Christian music or Christian art. If we tie it down, it's almost like saying you can only read or listen or watch in one language. For me, that wouldn't make sense. There is such a richness in other cultures, in other religions. So to make it so narrow for me would be to cut out a huge part as well of the very abstract interaction with something like nature. So I think anything and everything is talking to us. And I think people are often scared that they will be led astray. I don't ever have that fear in terms of that my core beliefs will be shaken to such a degree that I've only just found real wisdom in whatever I was busy with or watching. I mean, art speaks on such a deep subconscious level that there really is no language or no creed. It's on such a deep level that you only know that you touched in some way and that you changed in some way, and it's irrelevant from what source it was coming.
It's interesting. I can't remember the poem exactly, but Emily Dickinson said, sometimes when the truth is conveyed to us, if it is conveyed to us directly, it will blind us.
Tell it slant.
So you tell it slant.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You tell it slant.
Yeah.
And that is how the truth through books and movies and art and often it comes at us slant.
Yeah.
Or slanted.
Yes.
So I think that resonates with us.
Yeah. And for you?
Yeah, I can only repeat what you are saying and agree with that. On so many levels, it's difficult to convey that when you're busy building like the chapel, there's a conversation. when you're busy restoring a piece of furniture, there's a conversation. Because there's no words, but it's just, there's dialogue, there's interaction.
Yes, yeah.
And Jasper, the border collie, he understands full sentences. So I can talk to him and there's a conversation there. But then books in particular and movies, my life is enriched through them, and I'm exposed to a variety of voices. I love that. Because I realize I can get stuck in whatever rut I am. It can be a viewpoint, it can be
any kind of ego construct.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'm attached to that, and sometimes I need to be shaken a little bit and say, have you thought about this? Sometimes to read a book that's quite contrary to what I understand or what I believe, and say, all right, I think it's important.
So to keep an open mind.
Yes, and to be stretched and to be challenged.
So how do you decide what to read?
That's an unfair
That's
question.
stretching you a little bit.
I love C.S. Lewis's quote that says, before reading another new book, read an old book. And somehow I try to work
like
that.
Like a book that was written long ago.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes, yes. Few centuries ago and so on. A classic. So to a degree I follow that. So I don't only follow the New York Times bestseller lists and who won this year's Booker Prize or the Pulitzer Prize or whatever, but then I go back to old books. So that helps me. And we'll talk about something. And then I'll start reading about that. It intrigues me. And often I'll read a book and there will be a footnote and that will take me to another author. I love discovering new authors in this way. So it depends. There's not a set rule. It happens. And I trust the process as to what is the next book I'm having in hand.
Would you say it's a little bit intuitive?
I think so. I think so. And also trying not to force it too much. To be guided. At some point I had to make peace with the fact that in this lifetime I won't be able to read all the books that I would love to read. That's on my reading list and so on. And then just working through the ones that I have and announces them itself and trust that process.
And movies?
Yeah, movies. Matilda and I often say movies must be one of the most beautiful collaborations, creative collaborations that you can find.
Vast.
Because if you look at the credit rolls at the end of movies and you see the people being involved, it's the actors, it's the director, it is camera crew,
costume design,
the editors. An editor plays a huge role in a movie. It can make or break a movie. So it's all these creative minds coming together around this single art piece, this message, this. So it's wonderful. I love movies, and I love movies where they really push the envelope, where the genre, where they bend a genre. I love it because they will tell you it's in this genre, and a genre almost creates an expectation, and then they bend it. And they do something that you don't expect to find in this genre. But that conveys a certain message. I love it when they do that.
And if it's not a good book or a good movie?
No, then I don't push through. After the first, I'll really give it the benefit of the doubt, but I've already said I have such a long list, and really I can't waste too much time on a bad book. I've got places to see and books to read.
Yeah. For me, it's usually when I start looking at how far the end of the chapter still is.
When I skip 3 chapters and I can still follow the thread, then I know this isn't going to be a good book.
Yeah, I think the same with movies. We will watch a movie in about half an hour, even less into it. We'll look at each other and just go, no, we can't. There's too little time.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you another question. Yeah, how does it play into our way of life, our spirituality? How does this tie in with that for you?
It ties in through conversation. And when we talk about conversation, is to be constantly open. I find it really sad when I discover people who close themselves in or who close down, not letting influences come to them. I think being in a conversation is to be constantly open and to listen to different voices from different cultural groups, from different languages, from different eras, from different genres, reading a play, reading a poem, reading a child's story. I mean, it's endless. So to be constantly open to listen to those voices. And it also ties into inclusivity. Not to be exclusive. Say, I'm here and they there. But almost to be, trying to be as expansive as God is.
Yeah, and to be touched by everything.
Yes.
To allow things to really reach you on a very deep level.
Yeah.
Are there any books that you can say that came just at the right time, or that was a bridge for you?
Yes, it's almost like portals. Or one can almost say it's like a force field. One is in an orbit around your planet, and then you discover this book, and it's almost like a slingshot, and it puts you in another orbit. And the circle is wider, and then you discover another book, and it's another slingshot, and it puts you in another orbit.
Yeah.
So it's this constant widening of the circles. I think the first book that comes to mind is Henry Thoreau's Walden. That remains a big favorite of mine. And he opened the world up to nature writing and being open to nature and being influenced by nature and just being a good writer.
And living simply.
Living simply. Yeah. Living simply. So I would say he was one of my first big influences. The Artist Way by Julia Cameron, that had a big impact on my life, but also I know on your life. A book that works on deep levels when you're busy with that. And not so much a reading book, but a working book.
A workbook. And it's actually a book for anybody that feels that their creativity is stifled, and to open up your creativity. But we always say there should be a warning sign that says, beware, this book will change your life. So if you don't feel like changing your life,
don't read it.
Don't go there.
Yeah. If you satisfied with your life as it is, and you love your rut,
it's also interesting how sometimes you have a book in your hand that almost dropped into your lap, and you know it's an important book, but you cannot, it doesn't open itself to you. It's still a closed book.
Yeah, when you stand with it in your hand, it doesn't open.
No,
and you take it.
You take it because somehow you intuit that this is an important book. And then very much later, years later, for me a book like that was Matthew Fox's Original Blessing. That is about the whole concept of creation-centered spirituality that was for me, in the end, when it did break open for me, was like a homecoming.
Yes.
Like somebody understands my spirituality. So that also happens. That you know, but it's not available to you right away.
And we have to say, we're talking about here about books and movies and so on, but it's not everybody's cup of tea.
No, and I think we have to realize that like I said, for me, we are constantly interacting.
Yeah.
Constantly, and it is not necessarily a verbal conversation that's happening. And for some people, that they just function on other levels, and they are interacting on other levels.
Yeah, and the conversation partners take on other forms. So to be open to whatever conversation partner announces itself, it can be very, very interesting. Thank you for spending the time today with us. Hope you have a lovely day and a week ahead. Keep well.
Keep well, everybody. Goodbye.